The wind howled through the empty streets of the alien city, carrying dust and the faint smell of burned metal. A lone figure trudged along the cracked stones, his boots heavy, his coat torn and dirty. The human had walked for hours, maybe even days. He had lost count of time. All he wanted was shelter, a warm place to rest and something to eat. Every inn he passed was either full or demanded a price he could not pay. His stomach growled, his hands shook from cold, and his eyes burned with exhaustion. Finally, he saw it, a small inn tucked between two enormous buildings. The sign above the door was faded, its letters strange but readable. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself, and pushed the door open. A bell rang, soft but strange, sounding like a bird trapped in a cage. The interior was dim, lit by a single flickering lamp, shadows dancing along the walls. Behind a counter stood an alien woman, tall and thin, with sharp green eyes that seemed to look straight through him. Her skin was pale blue, almost glowing under the dim light, and her long hair shimmered silver. She studied him silently, tilting her head, as if weighing every thought he had. The human swallowed hard, suddenly feeling small and fragile in her gaze. He cleared his throat and spoke, his voice rough from dryness. I need a room, just for the night. I have little to offer, but the alien woman raised a hand, cutting him off before he could finish. Instead of asking for money or credits, she said something that froze him in place. The room comes with a companion, she said calmly, her eyes flicking to the side. The human blinked, confused, unsure if he had heard her correctly. A companion? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded once, sharply, her expression unreadable. My daughter will stay with you, she said, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. The human stepped back, nearly tripping over the edge of the counter. He felt his heart pound, a mix of fear and disbelief twisting inside him. Your daughter? He repeated, unable to hide the tremor in his voice. The woman's lips curved into a faint smile, almost cruel in its calmness. Yes. She will stay. She needs shelter just as you do, she said, her tone cold but precise. The human's mind raced. He had expected a room, a bed, maybe some food. He had not expected a child to be included in the deal. Was this a test? A trap? Something more dangerous he could not yet see? A soft sound came from behind the door at the side of the inn. A faint shuffle, like someone dragging their feet. The human turned and saw her for the first time. A young alien girl, barely more than a child. Her skin was pale like her mother's, but had faint golden markings along her arms. Her hair was short and messy, a pale lavender color that seemed almost unreal. She stood silently, hugging her knees, her large eyes wide and scared. The human noticed the faint scars on her wrists and his stomach twisted. This was no ordinary girl. She had been through pain, through neglect, through fear. The mother noticed his gaze and said quietly, almost as a warning, she is fragile. Do not frighten her. She only trusts slowly. The human nodded, swallowing hard, feeling the weight of the responsibility suddenly pressing down on him. He had come looking for safety, but now he realized he had entered a place of shadows and secrets. The inn was quiet except for the wind outside and the soft hum of the flickering lamp. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, as if the walls themselves were watching him. The girl shifted slightly, peeking at him from behind the door. He smiled gently, slowly, trying not to frighten her. I won't hurt you, he said softly, his voice steady despite the fear he felt inside. She blinked, her eyes unsure, then quickly looked away. The human knew he had to earn her trust, but he also knew that this night would test both of them. The alien mother's eyes never left him, sharp and calculating. It was clear she had her own rules, her own power over this place. And yet he could sense something else, something fragile hiding behind her stern gaze. He took a deep breath, straightening his back. He had wanted shelter, warmth, a simple bed for the night. Instead, he had found a puzzle, a challenge, and perhaps danger. But he also felt a strange pull, a sense that this encounter was not by chance, that maybe, in some way, his path was tied to this girl and the alien mother forever. The wind outside continued to howl. The city seemed alive with whispers and secrets, and the human knew one thing for sure. Nothing about this night would be simple. He had entered the inn as a stranger, but by morning, nothing would remain the same. Morning light crept slowly through the dusty windows of the inn, but inside the room felt cold and heavy. The human woke to the faint sound of quiet movement. Careful and deliberate, he turned his head and saw her. The girl. The daughter his mother-in-law had mentioned so casually the night before. She sat near the far corner, knees drawn to her chest, staring at the floor. Her eyes flickered up at him once, sharp and uncertain, then quickly darted away. The human noticed the way her shoulders tensed, how she flinched at every creak of the old wooden floor. It was clear she had never known comfort, never known kindness, and perhaps never known safety. He rose slowly, not wanting to frighten her, and moved toward the small table near the lamp. "Good morning," he said softly. His voice low and calm. She did not respond, but he could feel her eyes watching him. He set down the meager breakfast he had bought from a street vendor outside, a small loaf of bread and a few fruit slices. The aroma drifted toward her, and for a brief moment he saw her inhale sharply. Hunger, or perhaps curiosity, pulled at her. Though she still stayed frozen in her corner, the human took a seat across from her, careful to give her space. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said again, this time adding a small smile. She tilted her head slightly, almost imperceptibly, but her large eyes still glimmered with caution. It was a subtle gesture, but he recognized it. A small sign of trust. He realized quickly that earning her trust would take time, patience and gentleness. He could not force her to speak, could not force her to look at him. All he could do was be present, steady, and kind. The alien girl finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't talk to strangers," she said, each word heavy with fear. The human nodded, keeping his voice soft. "That's okay. You don't have to talk if you don't want to," he said. Her eyes widened slightly, surprised that he did not demand more. For the first time, he noticed the faint golden markings along her arms. Glowing softly in the dim light, they were delicate, beautiful, but also a sign of her alien heritage, something that might make others see her as different, fragile, or even dangerous. As the day moved on, he watched her carefully, noticing how she avoided eye contact, how she flinched when he moved too quickly. She picked at her food, eating slowly, as if unsure whether she was allowed to take more. The human realized that she had grown up in a world where she was never allowed freedom, never allowed choice. Each small gesture, each cautious glance, told him a story of fear, control, and survival. He felt a mix of anger and sorrow rising inside him. How could someone treat a child like this? And yet he knew that anger alone would not help her. He needed to show her a different way, a way to feel safe. By afternoon, the landlord returned, her eyes sharp and calculating. She watched them both, her gaze lingering on the girl, who immediately stiffened, retreating slightly. The human noticed the unspoken tension between mother and daughter, a history of fear, manipulation, and control. The mother spoke casually, as if nothing unusual had happened. "Make sure she eats, stranger." "She needs strength," she said, her tone neutral but carrying an unspoken command. The girl flinched at her mother's words, then looked at the human with silent pleading. He understood immediately. She needed him to protect her, to stand beside her, even if he did not yet know the full story. As evening approached, the human decided to take a small risk. He spoke gently. "Would you like to see outside? The city is strange but beautiful." The girl hesitated, her eyes narrowing, unsure if this was a trick. But hunger and curiosity pulled at her once more, and slowly she nodded. He led her to the small balcony outside the room, the wind brushing against their faces. Carrying the smell of the busy streets below, she clung to the railing, silent, but her eyes widened in awe at the lights and movement of the alien city. For a moment she forgot fear, forgotten rules, forgotten her mother's control. And the human realized something important. She had never seen the world as free as hers to explore that night. He sat near her as she slept, quietly watching. He saw the tension in her body, the way she twitched in her dreams. It was clear she had nightmares often, memories of harsh words, punishment, and neglect. He made a silent promise to himself. He would not leave her in this world of fear. He would be her shield, her ally. Perhaps even the first person to treat her with pure kindness. The bond between them was fragile, like a thread, but it had begun. And as the wind whispered through the alleyways below, he knew the coming days would test both of them. For in the heart of the alien city, with a strict and watchful mother nearby, freedom was fragile and danger was always near. But for the first time, the daughter looked at him and did not turn away. Her eyes were small, cautious sparks of hope. And the human understood. This was only the beginning of something that could change both their lives forever. The night had fallen, and the alien city outside the small inn was alive with distant sounds, wheels clattering over metal streets, voices speaking in strange tones, and occasional flashes of light from hovering vehicles. Inside the room, the human moved quietly, placing a few personal items on the small shelf, trying not to disturb the girl who watched him from her corner. She had eaten, though slowly, and now she sat silently, hugging her knees as if they could protect her from the entire world. The human glanced at her, and for the first time, he noticed the small scars on her wrists and the faint bruises hidden beneath her sleeves. His stomach tightened. This child had lived a life of pain and neglect, and her mother had allowed it, maybe even encouraged it. He wanted to ask questions, to understand why she was treated this way, but he knew the words could frighten her. Instead, he spoke gently, his voice calm like the wind through the quiet streets. "You are safe here, at least with me. No one will hurt you," he said. She flinched slightly, her eyes wide, unsure whether to believe him or run. Her lips parted, and for a moment, she seemed like she wanted to speak, to tell him something. But then the shadow of fear returned, and she stayed silent, retreating deeper into herself. The human sighed quietly, realizing that earning her trust would take more than words. He needed to show her safety through actions, not promises. He moved toward the small table and placed a blanket near her corner, folding it neatly. "This is for you. You can rest if you want," he said softly. She glanced at it, her eyes flickering, but she did not move. He left the room to the small balcony, letting the night air fill his lungs. He could feel the weight of the mother's watchful eyes from somewhere in the building, unseen but present. This was no ordinary shelter. The inn had rules, and the landlord was always observing, always judging, always controlling. Later, the daughter crept slowly toward the table where the human had left a small candle burning. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the light, as if it could burn her or perhaps guide her. The human noticed her and smiled gently, sitting down without moving too close. "You can keep it near you if it makes you feel safe," he said. Her lips quivered, and for a brief moment, a spark of curiosity shone in her eyes. She took the candle, holding it tightly, and moved back to her corner. He understood that trust was fragile, like the thin flame, easy to blow out but possible to nurture. Suddenly, a creak came from the hall outside, the alien mother returning unexpectedly. The girl stiffened immediately, her body rigid with fear. The human rose slowly, standing between her and the door. The mother's green eyes scanned the room, her gaze sharp and calculating. "You are close to her," she said, almost a statement, almost a warning. "I am not hurting her," the human replied calmly. The mother's lips curved into a small, almost mocking smile. "Words are easy. Actions are another matter," she said, turning away and leaving as silently as she had arrived. The girl exhaled shakily, sinking to the floor. The human knelt beside her, keeping his voice quiet and soothing. "See? She is gone for now. You are safe," he whispered. She nodded slightly, but her eyes told a story of a life full of caution, fear, and obedience. The rest of the night passed in uneasy silence, the human keeping his distance yet always nearby. He noticed small details, her bare feet shivering on the cold floor, the way she flinched at every sound outside, the way her eyes darted nervously when shadows moved in the corners. He realized that this shelter was not truly safe yet. It was a fragile illusion, balanced between his protection and her mother's control. But he also realized something else. This girl had never known anyone who cared for her without conditions, and that care, that presence, even in small gestures, could begin to change her by morning. The girl had moved slightly closer to him, though still cautious. He watched as she picked at the blanket he had laid out, smoothing it with trembling fingers. The bond between them was forming slowly. Quietly, almost imperceptibly, it was a bond of need and hope, of fear and the first sparks of trust. The human knew the days ahead would be full of challenges, of tests from the mother and the world outside. But he also knew that he could not leave, not when she needed someone to stand between her and the harshness of life. He made a silent vow to protect her, to show her that there could be kindness in a world that had given her so little. As the sun rose, light spilling into the room, he looked at the girl, her eyes following him with cautious interest. For the first time he saw her curiosity, her quiet hope, and even her fear mingled with trust. The inn was no longer just a place to rest. It was a stage for something much larger, a story of courage, defiance, and the beginning of a bond that could not be broken by fear alone. And though the day ahead would test both of them, he knew they were ready, in their own fragile way. For the world outside could be cruel, but inside the small room of the inn, for the first time she had a chance to breathe, to hope and maybe, to dream. The night fell again over the alien city, darker than before, with long shadows stretching across the narrow streets. Inside the small inn, the human sat quietly at the table, listening to the soft hum of the city outside. The girl was in her corner, curled up under the thin blanket, her golden markings glowing faintly in the dim light. She was silent, but the tension in the room was thick, almost like the walls themselves were holding their breath. The human knew that tonight would reveal more than he had expected. He could feel it in the air, heavy and uneasy. Suddenly, a soft noise came from under the bed, a faint scraping. Almost imperceptible, the human froze, watching closely. The girl's eyes widened, and she pressed herself closer to the wall. "What is it?" he whispered gently, keeping his voice calm. She shook her head slightly, biting her lip, afraid to answer. The human slowly knelt down, peering under the bed, and saw it, chains, old and rusty. Tucked beneath a thin cloth, he picked them up carefully, feeling a chill run down his spine. These were not toys, not decoration, but tools of punishment, a silent reminder of fear and control. He placed the chains back under the cloth, careful not to alarm the girl. "Your mother?" He started but stopped. Unsure how to phrase it, she flinched at the word, and he realized how deep her fear ran. She had learned to associate family with pain, love with rules, and care with danger. He understood then that this was not just a story of shelter, but a story of survival. Every moment in this inn, every glance from her mother, had been a lesson in obedience and fear. The girl finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. She punishes me if I make a mistake," she said. The human's jaw tightened, anger bubbling inside him. How could someone treat a child like this? He thought, but he did not raise his voice, did not shout. He knew that fear and anger would only push her further away. Instead, he sat near her, offering a calm presence. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he said softly. Her eyes searched his face, looking for truth, looking for safety. Slowly, she inched closer, still cautious but curious. The human realized that the landlord's control extended beyond simple words or rules. It was embedded in the girl's very being, in her movements, in her eyes, in the way she flinched at shadows every night, every day. The landlord had built a world where the girl's fear kept her silent, obedient, invisible, and yet, despite it all, there was a spark inside her, a small flicker of hope. The human made a promise in his heart. He would nurture that spark, keep it alive. No matter what the alien mother said, no matter what the city whispered, he would be her shield, her safe place, her friend. Later, he heard the soft creak of the hallway, footsteps approaching. Careful and deliberate, the girl tensed immediately, her body rigid with fear. The human placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, a silent signal that she was not alone. The alien mother appeared in the doorway, her eyes sharp and calculating. "You are too close to her," she said, her tone calm but dangerous. The human met her gaze steadily, refusing to step back. "She is not yours to control," he said, his voice firm but quiet. The mother's eyes narrowed, and she studied him as if weighing his strength, his resolve, his intentions. For a moment the room was silent, charged with unspoken tension. Finally, the mother spoke again, her words like a warning. "Careful, stranger. There are consequences for those who interfere." And then she turned and left, the shadows swallowing her as she disappeared into the hallway. The girl exhaled shakily, her body relaxing slightly. The human knelt beside her, his eyes kind. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. "I will protect you." Her lips quivered and she nodded slightly, the first sign of trust she had shown in days. It was fragile, like a thin thread, but it existed, and that was enough for now. The human spent the rest of the night quietly, watching, listening, and learning. He noticed how she shifted in her sleep, how her dreams were restless, haunted by memories of punishment, neglect, and fear. He realized that the shadows in the inn were more than just darkness. They were the echoes of her past, the chains of her mother's control, and he understood something important. True shelter was more than a room or a bed. It was trust, protection, and the chance to breathe without fear. He would provide that shelter, no matter the cost, no matter the danger. By dawn, the girl had moved closer to him while sleeping. A small but powerful gesture, Her golden markings shimmered faintly in the morning light. The human smiled softly, understanding that trust was growing, slow but steady. The shadows in the room had not vanished, but they were no longer suffocating. He had become her anchor in a world that had never shown her kindness. And for the first time he felt the weight of responsibility not as a burden, but as a purpose to protect, to care, to fight against the darkness until she could stand on her own. The wind outside carried whispers of the city, of life moving on without mercy. But inside the small inn, a fragile bond had begun to form. Between the human and the alien girl, caught in the shadows of control, and though danger and fear would test them both, hope had found a place to grow. The story of shelter had become a story of trust, courage, and the first steps toward freedom, and neither of them would ever be the same again. The sun hung low over the alien city, casting long shadows that crawled across the cracked streets. Inside the small inn, the tension was thicker than ever, almost tangible. The human moved quietly, carrying a small tray of food for the girl, who sat near the corner, still cautious but watching him intently. Each step he took seemed to echo in the room, a reminder that every movement mattered. Every glance was noticed. The alien mother had left for the day, but her presence lingered like a dark cloud. The girl's hands trembled as she took the food, her eyes flicking nervously to the door. She had learned long ago that no one could be trusted, not even those who offered kindness. The human sat down across from her, keeping a safe distance. "You don't have to eat fast," he said gently. "Take your time. This is yours." Her small fingers gripped the bread, and for the first time, she seemed to relax just a little. The human watched her carefully, noting every movement, every twitch, every sign of fear or hesitation. He knew that patience would be his greatest weapon in this battle. More than strength or words, hours passed, and the girl finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear. Why do you care?" The human looked at her, meeting her wide, cautious eyes. "Because no one should live in fear," he said simply. "Especially not someone like you." She looked down, biting her lip, unsure whether to trust his words, but he could see the flicker of hope in her eyes. Small but real. It was enough to fuel his determination, to strengthen his resolve. Suddenly the door opened, and the alien mother stepped in, her eyes sharp and calculating. She had heard the conversation, had seen the subtle bond forming between them. "You are getting too close," she said, her voice smooth but dangerous. The human stood slowly, facing her without fear, though he could feel the tension rising. "She is not yours to control," he said firmly. His voice steady, the mother's lips curved into a faint, almost cruel smile. "Careful, stranger. You are far from home. Do you understand what you risk?" The girl flinched at her mother's words, pressing herself closer to the wall. But the human did not back down. "I understand, and I am willing to risk it. She will not live in fear anymore," he said, his eyes locked on hers. The mother's gaze sharpened like a blade ready to strike. "You dare defy me?" she hissed, her voice low but filled with anger. "Yes," the human replied calmly. "I will not let you use her as a pawn. She has a right to live without fear." The room grew silent, the weight of their confrontation filling every corner. The girl watched, her heart pounding, unsure what would happen next. For the first time, she saw someone willing to fight for her, willing to stand between her and the cruelty she had known all her life. The human could feel her hope growing, fragile but undeniable, and he knew that this moment was pivotal. One act of defiance could change everything. The mother's eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer, her voice cold and controlled. "You will regret this," she warned, her tone heavy with threat. The human met her step with his own, unwavering. "I already regret nothing," he said simply. "I will protect her, no matter what you do." The girl finally spoke, her voice trembling but strong. I don't want to go back," she said. The human nodded, understanding the courage it took for her to say those words. "You don't have to," he replied gently. "You can stay, and you are safe with me." The mother's face darkened, her hands clenching at her sides. "You think you can change things in my inn?" she demanded. The human shook his head slowly, keeping his voice calm. "I can't change everything, but I can change her life." "That is enough," he said. The mother stared at him for a long moment, her eyes sharp and calculating. Then, with a final, almost imperceptible glance at her daughter, she turned and left the room. The door clicked shut, leaving a silence that was heavy, but different, less fearful, more charged with possibility. The girl exhaled slowly, sinking to the floor, relief washing over her. The human knelt beside her, his voice soft and soothing. She is gone for now. You are safe, he whispered. She nodded, her small hands gripping his sleeve, as if anchoring herself to him for the first time. She felt something new, hope, courage, the beginning of trust. The human smiled gently, knowing that this was only the start. The inn might still hold shadows. The mother's influence might linger. But for now they had defied her together, and that was the first step toward freedom. As night fell once more over the alien city, the human and the girl sat together quietly. The wind whispered through the streets below, carrying distant voices and the hum of life. Inside the small room, a bond had been forged in defiance, fragile but strong, and though the days ahead would bring tests, challenges, and perhaps danger, for the first time, the girl knew she was not alone, and the human knew that his purpose in this strange city had become clear: to protect, to care, and to fight for the life of someone who had never known kindness, until now. The alien city was restless that night, the streets alive with strange lights, distant shouts, and the hum of hovercrafts gliding past. Inside the small inn, the human paced quietly, thinking, planning, and listening. The girl sat in her corner, her small hands clutching the thin blanket, her eyes wide and alert. She had grown used to fear, to shadows, to the sound of approaching footsteps that always meant trouble. But tonight was different. She sensed a change in him, a determination she had never seen before. He was no longer just a stranger seeking shelter. He had become a protector, a shield against the cruelty of her world. The alien mother's presence was still felt, though she had left the room. Her influence lingered in the air, in the shadows, in the unspoken rules that bound the girl. But the human refused to be intimidated, refused to step back, refused to let fear dictate their lives. He moved to the small window, peering out at the city below and then back at the girl. Tonight, he said quietly, we begin to take control of our own lives. Her eyes flickered up at him. Hesitant but curious, she had never heard anyone speak like that before. Not to her, not to her mother. His voice was calm, firm, and full of courage, and for the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, someone would stand for her. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the occasional sound of footsteps in the hall or the faint whistle of wind through the cracks in the walls. The human watched the girl closely, noticing the subtle signs of her anxiety, the way she flinched at shadows, the way her body stiffened when she thought danger was near. He realized that protection was not just about standing in front of her. It was about teaching her that she could stand beside him, that she could face fear without flinching, and that she could trust someone without reservation. Suddenly, the inn's door opened, and the mother returned, her eyes sharp and dangerous. You are still here, she said, her voice cold, almost a blade slicing through the tension. Yes, the human replied firmly, refusing to step back. The mother's gaze flickered to the girl, who shrank slightly but did not move away from the human. The human stepped closer, standing between them, a silent barrier of defiance. She is not yours to command, he said, his voice steady and unwavering. The mother's lips tightened, and she studied him like a predator assessing its prey. You dare to challenge me in my own inn? She hissed, her voice low and dangerous. Yes, he replied, and I will continue to do so. You will not hurt her again. The girl watched, her small body trembling, her heart pounding. She had never seen anyone confront her mother like this, never seen courage so calm and unshakable. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope, a spark of strength within herself, and she realized that she could fight too, not with words, not yet, but with trust, with presence, with courage she had never known she possessed. The mother's eyes narrowed, her lips curving into a small, almost imperceptible smile. You are brave, she said, her tone almost reluctant. But bravery alone will not protect you here. The human shook his head slowly, meeting her gaze evenly. Perhaps not, he said, but it will protect her tonight, and that is enough. A tense silence filled the room, broken only by the soft sound of the girl's breathing. The human knelt beside her. Offering his hand, she hesitated, then took it slowly, her small fingers curling around his. It was a simple gesture, but it carried a weight of trust, of connection, of defiance. The human felt a surge of determination. He would not let fear rule them. He would not let the mother's cruelty win. He was not just protecting her body. He was protecting her spirit, her mind, her right to exist without fear. Hours turned into early morning and the mother finally left, her eyes never leaving them until she disappeared into the shadows of the inn. The girl exhaled shakily, sinking to the floor, relief and exhaustion washing over her. The human knelt beside her, his hand still holding hers gently. "You are safe now," he said softly. "Tonight. No one will harm you." She nodded slowly, her small shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. The room was quiet, but the tension had not vanished entirely. It lingered like a shadow, a reminder of the dangers yet to come. But for the first time, the girl felt a sense of hope, a feeling she had never known before. The human looked out the window, watching the city awake. Lights flickering, shadows moving. He knew the days ahead would be difficult, filled with tests, challenges, and threats from those who would seek to control her. But he also knew that together, they were stronger than fear, stronger than cruelty, stronger than the shadows that lurked around every corner. The bond between them had grown, fragile but resilient. And as the sun rose over the alien city, painting the streets in gold and silver, the human made a silent vow. He would stand for her, fight for her, and protect her no matter what came next. Because courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to face it. And tonight he had made that choice. The girl pressed closer, trusting him in a way she had never trusted anyone before. The human smiled softly, feeling the weight of responsibility and the warmth of connection. And though the world outside was still dangerous, cruel and unpredictable inside that small room, in the heart of the alien inn, for the first time they were not alone, and for the first time, they both understood the meaning of true shelter. The first light of dawn spilled over the alien city, painting the cracked streets in soft gold and silver. Inside the small inn, the human and the girl sat quietly, the tension of the previous night lingering like a shadow. But something had changed. Fear was still there. Yes, but hope had taken root, small and fragile. The girl's eyes, once wide with uncertainty, now held a spark of courage, a flicker of trust. She looked at him quietly, as if testing the limits of this newfound safety. The human met her gaze with a calm smile, letting her know without words that he was there for her, always. The alien mother had not appeared since the confrontation, but her influence still lingered in the walls. Every creak, every shadow reminded them that freedom was fragile. Yet the human had a plan, a simple but bold idea. He would make this place a shelter, truly safe. No more rules, no more fear, no more control. He began quietly arranging the room, fixing the small bed, placing blankets and simple meals. Each small act was a declaration of care, a silent rebellion against the cruelty the girl had known her whole life. The girl watched him, her curiosity slowly overcoming her caution. She edged closer, her small hands reaching out to help. Together they cleaned, organized, and made the space theirs. It was a simple act, but to the girl it felt like reclaiming a little piece of the world. For the first time she felt a sense of belonging, a feeling she had never experienced. The human noticed the small smiles, the glimmers of laughter she allowed herself, and he knew that change was possible, even in a place shadowed by fear. Later he took her to the balcony, the city stretching before them in strange lights and motion. "You see this city?" he asked gently. "It's big and strange, but it can also be ours if we choose it to be." She nodded slowly, her eyes scanning the streets, the flying vehicles, the towering buildings. For the first time she saw possibilities instead of danger, paths instead of walls. She felt the wind on her face, carrying the smells and sounds of a world that had seemed too cruel to enter, and she realized that she could step forward, that she could leave behind the fear that had ruled her life. The human spoke softly. "I know your mother tried to make you small, to keep you afraid, to make you feel like you had no choice." She listened, her eyes wide, drinking in every word. "But you do have a choice," he continued. "You can stay here with me, safe, or you can step into the world and take your life back. Either way, I will not let fear control you again." Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness but of relief, of understanding, of the first freedom she had ever known. She nodded, the smallest smile forming on her lips. And in that moment the human knew. They were no longer merely strangers sharing a room. They were allies, companions, a team against the shadows of the past. The day moved slowly, the inn quiet except for the sounds of the city outside. The human showed her small things, how to make simple meals, how to fold blankets, how to care for herself. Each small skill was a step toward independence, a tiny piece of freedom. The girl absorbed everything, her confidence growing with each passing hour. She laughed quietly at a small mistake, and the sound was like music in the quiet room. The human felt warmth in his chest, a joy he had not expected when he had first arrived seeking shelter. By evening, the alien mother appeared once more, standing in the doorway, her eyes narrowed, her arms crossed. But something in her gaze had shifted. The human stood calmly, placing himself slightly in front of the girl. "She is free to choose now," he said quietly. The mother studied them, the girl standing slightly behind him, taller than she had been the night before. For a long moment she said nothing, and then slowly she turned and left. The weight of control had lifted. At least for now, the girl exhaled deeply, relief washing over her. She stepped closer to the human, her trust complete, her fear fading. Night fell again, but this time the shadows felt lighter, less threatening. The human sat near the girl, keeping watch not because he had to, but because he wanted to. She rested her head lightly against his shoulder, finally allowing herself the comfort she had never known. In that simple act, the human felt a bond stronger than fear, stronger than cruelty, stronger than the walls of the inn. It was a bond of trust, of courage, of hope. A new beginning for both of them. The alien city continued its restless hum outside, but inside the small inn, there was safety, there was kindness. There was the first step toward freedom. And though the days ahead would surely bring challenges, dangers and tests for the first time, the girl knew she had a choice, and for the first time, the human knew his purpose had found him completely. Together they faced the unknown, ready to build a future not defined by fear or cruelty, but by trust, courage, and the simple power of kindness. And as the moon rose over the alien city, casting silver light through the windows, they both knew that this was not the end, but the true beginning of a new life.